Hey everybody, welcome back to the Joe Rockstar channel.
In the last video, we looked closely at the two-stroke, how it works, and some of the advantages and disadvantages. I also shared with you guys some of the struggles I had with this particular two-stroke. I'm still trying to get the carb to stop leaking, and after 3 weeks, I still haven't received the parts I ordered.
Okay, so just when you think everything's fixed, this thing just starts leaking gas everywhere again.
But a leaking carb hasn't stopped me from riding the 300. It just discourages me from getting too far away from the fuel can, if you know what I mean. Meanwhile, I put in some much needed seat time on the Husky 350 4-stroke. And the 4-stroke is what I wanted to look closer at in this video. Now, 4-strokes are commonly represented as a complex engine that is complicated and difficult to work on by the 2-stroke faithful. And this argument has some merit when it's compared to the 2-stroke. Remember this animation from our previous video? One of the major differences between a 2 and a 4-stroke is the presence of intake and exhaust valves on the 4-stroke. These valves replace the function of the transfer and exhaust port of the 2-stroke. The advantage of having valves instead of ports is that the timing of the intake and exhaust ports opening and closing creates a linear power band that provides smooth power delivery throughout the majority of the throttle range. On a 4-stroke, you never need to be on the pipe, and for many beginning riders, this makes riding easier. But it also might serve to make the 4-stroke a little too tame and boring for some more aggressive riders. While the advantages of having valves could be debated, the disadvantages are very clear. Valves add extra moving parts that a 2-stroke doesn't need, like a timing chain, sprockets, and cams to name a few. This means more parts that can wear or break, and more work when you need to tear into the engine for maintenance and repairs. Valves need to be checked often and adjusted when necessary. It's not a difficult procedure, but it's one that's not necessary when you have a 2-stroke. And if you pay to have it done, most dealers are going to make you pay way more than you should. All of this supports the claim that a 4-stroke requires more maintenance and is more expensive than the 2-stroke. But not so fast. If you do valve checks and adjustments yourself, it's pretty easy and the cost is negligible. And in my experience so far, these engines do not require rebuilds as often as a 2-stroke. In fact, my 500 was close to 300 hours without needing a valve adjustment, and still going strong on the original piston. I'm not sure that that's enough to call this aspect of the debate a draw. The 2-stroke is undeniably cheaper and easier to work on, even if it does require it more often. And the 4-stroke rebuild is going to be a ball-busting expense. But it's not a major factor that would affect my decision between the 2-stroke and the 4-stroke. Now that doesn't mean you should agree with me, it's just my personal take. Now when it comes to raw power, the 4-stroke CCs to CCs cannot compete with the smoker. The 2-stroke delivers its power to the piston on each downstroke, while the 4-stroke fires on every other downstroke. This means that the 4-stroke crankshaft has to make a revolution in between each power stroke. That makes this engine more prone to stalling in technical terrain. Vegas Romaniac does a great job of explaining this in his video, and I don't think I can really improve on what he said, so I'll leave a link to this explanation in the comments. Go check it out. Now this tendency to stall is pretty much the best case against a 4-stroke if you ask me. However, I recently added a recluse to the 350, and it hasn't stalled since. There are some drawbacks to the recluse clutch though, and that's a subject for another video.
Alright, this is the timed lap, lap 2.
So all in all, the biggest gripe I have about the 4-stroke is checking valves and the cost of doing a top end when it's going to inevitably need one. But when it comes to riding this Husqvarna FX 350, it is much more difficult to find something to complain about. This 350 is a dream to ride. The 4-stroke tracks great. It feels planted compared to the sketchy instability I feel on the 2-stroke. Both bikes corner well, but the 350 is so much easier as the power comes on controlled and smooth. I find the rear wheel stepping out less and I get less tire spin. And that's probably what I'm most impressed with when it comes to the 350. I mean, it weighs more. It has more reciprocating mass, yet it turns so easy, and it doesn't wear me out as fast as the 300. To ensure you don't miss a single episode, subscribe to the channel and hit the little bell icon to receive a notification whenever a new video comes out. For the more serious rock stars out there, you can support the channel through my website at www.joerockstar.com. There you will find links to help keep the channel running via PayPal, Patreon, or purchasing Joe Rockstar gear like hats and t-shirts. And whatever advantage the 300 has in the more technical stuff, the all-around package of this particular four-stroke makes up for it everywhere else. And if I'm being honest, at my skill level, I really didn't even notice a big difference when the trail got technical. Up until lately, I have only ever ridden a four-stroke, and maybe I'm just too influenced by my thumper roots. So I was interested in seeing how an avid two-stroke owner would respond when comparing these two bikes. Jonathan is a fellow AMR racer in the B class, a fellow TRS member, and an all-around faster and better rider than I am. And he's also a proud owner of a KTM 250 XCW two-stroke, a perfect candidate to take these two bikes out and compare them.
All right, so we're here with Jonathan. He's invited me out here a few times to ride this turn track with him. I've been testing both the Husky and the 300 on it, and I know my times on it, but I'd like to take me out of the equation as the rider. And what we do is we put Jonathan on the bike. Now he's got a lot of time. He's a B rider in the AMR series, and he's tearing me up on no matter which bike he's on. So I think he knows what he's doing, and he's got no dog in this fight, although he does own a two-stroke 250. So you want to start out, tell us what you thought of the 300.
Okay, yeah, so going into the first corner, the thing I noticed about the 300, so this, these are more bike setup issues, is the front tire was a little squirmy. That's because he's running a Moose. I found that the rebound was a little slow. So throughout the lap, I kind of had to, compensate for that as I was trying to rip a fast lap. This is my first time on, a KTM 300 XC. My first time riding a Link bike. I found the power was really, it just kind of suffered when I hit a straightaway and went to wind the bike up. It kind of signed off a little early. So my lap time on this was 13 minutes and 41 seconds, just, doing the full loop. My normal lap time, it's usually in the range of like a 13:05, 13:15. Fastest ever is like a 12:56. So I was substantially slower, but I don't know, some of that I can chalk up to me riding a little bit slower. That's just like one data point to think about. And that's kind of where things ended up for me. It didn't really have anything that like blew me away immediately. It felt maybe a little bit closer to my two-stroke.
So let's talk about the Husky. How was your ride on the Husky?
Immediately when I was on this bike, I felt that it was much more stable and planted in the corners. I felt like I had a lot smoother throttle control on it. Like I could start like real low in the power and then wind it all the way up. The power, it felt on par with my 250 in terms of being able to have a little bit of bottom end grunt and to have some of that top end where it pulls a little bit harder. The 250 tends to pull a little bit harder, a little bit longer. But this is definitely a torquier off the bottom. Just a note, yeah, my 250, so it does have like the SX head and SX CDI, so it does, pull a little bit longer using those. My lap time on this ended up being it was a 13:19 on this. So I shaved a substantial amount of time off of my lap time with this bike. I think a lot of that just goes to me being able to be smoother in the corners with it.
And I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Which bike can you turn better? I felt like if I make a mistake on this bike, it's harder to recover than if I make a mistake on this. When I make a mistake on this bike, it's so easy to recover. If I start to go over, or if I blow a turn or whatever, it's not like I'm swinging out, like, you know, kicking out the back end and getting spun around or whatever. I could pretty much just ease it right back into the trail, and I feel a lot more confident that if I get into trouble on this bike, I'm in better shape.
This did have a much nicer throttle curve for this kind of stuff. It was real. It was just always smooth and always pulling on this track.
With the data Jonathan has provided and looking at my own lap times, it's hard to deny that the 350 has an advantage. Remember, Jonathan has never ridden these particular bikes before, and these results were from his first and only lap on the Husky. As for my lap times, I'm definitely faster on the 4-stroke. In fact, on a 4-mile course, I'm consistently between 45 seconds to a full minute faster on the 4-stroke than I am on the 2-stroke. Now consider how significant that is. Over the course of a 40-mile race, we're talking about a 10-minute gap. At this point, honestly, I think it's going to take a miracle for the KTM 300 XC to win this battle. But I don't think that's a referendum on 2-strokes. It may be unfair to compare these two particular bikes. Maybe the Husqvarna FX 350 is just a better ride than the 17 300 XC. Maybe a Yamaha YZ250 would fare better. How about the new fuel-injected 2-strokes from KTM and Husky? Is it possible that one of those would be a game changer for me? And what about the 2-stroke manufacturers? Couldn't the make, model, or year of these bikes have a huge impact on my highly unscientific method of comparison? Probably. So maybe what I need to do is try out some other bikes. Maybe some local riders are willing to let me ride their 2-strokes to compare. Maybe that's asking too much. Who knows? But until then, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.